Hey there, EB here. Happy Thursday. Reporting on the Anything But Bland weekly update. Just a quick health update. My knee is starting to feel so much better. I'm walking about 13 miles a week. Last night, I walked 3.5 miles with Renee, and I didn't have a brace on my left knee, and it's got some swelling this morning, but not what I have been used to. So I'm pretty happy. My shoulder, I'm getting some pretty good extension on it since my July 2nd shoulder surgery. And I have PT today, and man, PT hurts me more than working out does with heavy weights. So if you have surgery, make sure you go through your PT. Lot to talk about today. Let's just get in and roll up our sleeves. Yesterday, the Fed kept its interest rates steady. Obviously, there's the conflict between Powell and Trump, and we saw that displayed late last week when Trump went to visit the offices of the Federal Reserve Board, and there was a conflict of how much it's being cost for the renovations. However, even though they kept the interest rates steady, this was the first time in 12 years that two of the members of the board dissented. Those two members wanted a quarter point rate cut. Trump is putting enormous pressure on the Fed and on Powell. And it's something that is concerning to the markets because we can't let politics influence the monetary rate. Um, as a little bit of support for Powell's position this morning, the inflation rate showed a sharp uptick since Trump's tariff policies have gone in effect in the end of May and in June and in July. And the unemployment numbers are going to come out tomorrow, the new job numbers, and they're not as robust as they were in in June. So we will talk about the tariff deals that are coming in a flurry in a minute. Next, Texas is gerrymandering their House seats in the federal government and in Congress so that they can add five GOP seats. And other Republican red states are doing gerrymandering, which is reshaping the districts so that they will ensure that Republicans um, get reelected, and they're creating new districts and new seats. And so they believe that they will be able to add 40 or more Republican seats in the midterm election by doing gerrymandering. The problem with this is that the Democrats in Democrat states are going to do the same thing, and they're going to cut their districts up. And it's just going to be a continuous fight. There really shouldn't be gerrymandering that's going on by the political parties. It's a an affront to the free and fair elections and one man, one vote, and it's something that is really concerning. And this is going to create a ton of lawsuits. South Carolina faced this in the 90s. Dick Harpootlian and Richard Gergel challenged this in federal court, and they won. And that was before Richard Gergel became a federal judge. What's going on in Israel right now is, I think, Israel and the Gaza Strip. What's going on in the Gaza Strip is extremely concerning for the world. There's politicians in the United States that are using the word genocide. It's clearly a famine that is taking place. People are starving. Um, there are now Republicans who are saying, including Democrats, to stop selling weapons to Israel until they lift the restrictions so that people can get food. It's starting to get ridiculous. Yes, there's a lot of propaganda that's being put out. There was a photograph of a very sick young boy that showed his spine coming through his back and his ribs showing, and it looked like it was starvation, but it turned out to be uh, birth problems and significant medical problems that the kid had. But there's no question that what Israel's doing is killing off a lot of the Gazans. Um, Hamas does not want peace, so Israel's got to figure a way out of it. It's not a good look for Israel, especially when they talk about the Holocaust and the number of Jews that perished in the gas chambers at the hands of the Germans. If they are letting people starve, it's a real problem. And a lot of the European countries, France, Macron was the first who said in September, if this isn't resolved, that France will recognize Palestine as a state. Stormer in England um, agreed to do that. Germany agreed to do that. And then last night, Carney in Canada agreed to recognize Israel as Palestine as a state. And that is something that will anger the United States, and Israel better take notice of that. I think they have to open up the borders so that food can come in. Don't drop it from an airplane and make people, scurry like rats to get the food. Really set up food stations so that people can eat and get the medical care they need. The plane crash that happened in D.C. earlier this year, that crashed into the helicopter, it turned out that the altimeters, which uh, gauge the altitude of the helicopters in the Army are off sometimes by 100 feet, and that the Army is okay with this. I think that's going to be changed. This morning, it looks like that Pete Hegseth, the cabinet official who's head of the Pentagon and the Department of Defense, is looking for an off ramp. It's rumored that he's looking to run for governor of Tennessee next year. He's had a rocky tenure, obviously, with signal um, chats that were about the bombing of the Houthis and some other bombings that we did that were highly confidential. There's chaos in his office where a lot of the top brass that he brought in that were loyal to him have quit over the last 6 months. He ran for office in 2012 in Minnesota and lost, but he's a good messenger for Trump. This is a way for Trump to get him out of the office without looking like that he's firing him. He's a charismatic guy. He talks like Trump. He acts like Trump. He's abusive, sometimes like Trump, to the press, and that is seems to be an attraction to the MAGA Republicans and even some of the middle. So it wouldn't surprise me if he makes a strong run for governor. Um, the Senate has been talking, but I don't think it's going to get anywhere because the House will never agree that uh, legislators should be banned from stock trading. Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, and a lot of the other long-term uh, Democrats as well as some Republicans have made billions and billions and billions of dollars trading stock. Nancy Pelosi and her husband have made a fortune, and they sit on these subcommittees and they know what's coming down the road in terms of government contracting with companies or what may happen in a certain industry. And they're either shorting stock, buying it, holding it, or they get stock issued to family and friends for certain things. So it's something that I think we definitely should do. I'm a big term limit guy, and I don't believe that legislature members should be able to trade stocks. This morning, Dmitry Medvedev said Trump's new deadline is a step towards war. As you know, Trump gave a 50-day deadline for Russia to end the war in Ukraine. This morning, he shortened it to 10 to 12 days. And Medvedev, who was the former president of Russia, who sometimes drinks, as it's known, um, said that we're inching towards war. Trump immediately stamped that down and said, you better shut your mouth. It really goes to show that when Trump talks now, the world is taking notice. Now let's start talking about the tariff deals. They've been coming in a flurry. I'm quite surprised. I'm surprised that these countries have agreed to this, but it just goes to show you the power of the United States consumer market and how much we consume from the rest of the world. Uh, Trump made a deal with Europeans. Um, he definitely rolled them over. Everybody said he got so much from them and nothing in return, where they're going to invest over $900 billion into our economy. It's not only that we're going to tariff their goods coming into our country, and they agreed to buy our goods without a tariff, but that they agreed to invest in United States infrastructure or whatever Trump tells them to do. Uh, Japan and South Korea both entered into tariff deals. China and the United States did not reach agree yesterday. They walked off from each other, but based on what Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said this morning, he thinks there is going to be a deal between China and the United States, which would be huge. Trump is definitely fighting with India and Brazil right now. He's mad at India because they've been buying Russian oil. So he's said that I'm upping their tariff. I think it's going to be to 50%. Brazil, he's extremely upset at Brazil, and he's upping their tariff from 50 to 90%. And he's leveled sanctions against the Supreme Court justice from Brazil, who's going after the former prime minister of Brazil, who was a Trump ally and who Trump really, really likes. Um, I guess that Trump is getting these good deals now because he's feared. The problem is these increased tariffs will ultimately be passed on to consumers, and we are seeing consumer spending stop slow. We're seeing inflation go up. The closer we get to Christmas, we'll see what the prices are going to be for a lot of these toy stores. So that's going to be the problem. In New York City earlier this week, a gunman who was carrying an assault rifle walked through the streets of Manhattan and went into a building to go to the NFL headquarters that are in that building. He got off at the wrong floor. Instead of getting off at, I think, 16, which is the NFL floor, he got off at 31, which is the Blackstone floor. And he shot and killed a police officer, a security guard, and two other people. It's very sad because he shot himself in the chest because he claimed he had CTE, and he wanted the Harvard and the Boston College laboratories to study his brain. He specifically cited Terry Long, who played offensive line for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 80s, who killed himself. And he had CTE. He killed himself by drinking a gallon of antifreeze. So the CTE is coming back to the forefront. Trump now is saying that there is real starvation in the Gaza Strip, which contradicts Netanyahu. And I really think that Trump is growing impatient with Netanyahu because Netanyahu does not seem to want to find a way to peace. Even though Hamas won't give up their leadership, there is a way to contain them. Israel has certainly accomplished all of its goals by, standing down Hezbollah, standing down Hamas, just decimating the Gaza Strip. There's no rebellion going on in the West Bank with the Palestinians. So it's pretty interesting. Uh, Last Thursday and Friday, the second in charge of the Justice Department, Todd Blanche, who was Trump's private lawyer for civil cases and criminal cases, went and met with Maxwell. It's unheard of that somebody in that high up would go meet with a convicted felon who's doing 20 years, who currently has an appeal before the United States Supreme Court. We want to know who was in the room. Um, because Justice Department said in June there's no credible evidence to bring actions against third parties. Yet Maxwell named 100 people, according to what's leaked from the meeting of people that have had sex with underage people or have been to the island for parties with Jeffrey Epstein. Um, it's really a problem of Trump's own doing because it's his MAGA people that he has ginned up over all these years because of the conspiracy theory. Trump's story is starting to change. Before he didn't know Epstein. Now Epstein, he knew and was a friend, did some business with. In 2019, he said he broke off from Epstein because they fought over a real estate deal. But this week he said, no, the reason that I'm no longer friends with Epstein is because he was raiding my spa and taking a lot of my good looking women, some who were underage, including he thought that the Virginia Guilfoyle woman who committed suicide, who was with Prince Andrew, was taken. So Trump is feeling the heat. Um, he's talking about that I can give a pardon. The victims of Maxwell, hundreds of families, have now come out and signed a petition saying it would be a disgrace and an affront to our children who were victims of Maxwell, who they call a monster, and Epstein of sexual abuse, to give a pardon. Trump's in a real vice on this one, and we're going to have to see how it plays out. The Trump administration, through Lee Zeldin, who is the cabinet official who's head of the EPA, wants to revoke the EPA's ability to make rules about climate pollution. That is tailpipe and smokestack pollution. Um, this will be an extraordinary thing, an extraordinary stripping of power from the EPA, and really return us to the point where we will have things that have happened in our history, like Love Canal and different pollutions that are coming. Now, I do agree that New York City has gone too far, that you can't grill burgers under an open flame and you can't use pizza ovens with wood. I mean, that's the heart of New York City's dining market. So there has to be a balance. There is, Trump has called for a prosecution of former Vice President Kamala Harris. I think that's going too far. He's trying to obviously divert attention away from the Epstein matter. Kamala Harris just announced that she is not running for governor of California next year. So she's obviously still has her sights set on the presidency of 2028. She has all the donors and the donor list. Our country wants change. They don't want more of Biden. They don't want more of Harris. We want new people, younger people. And I think if the Democratic Party keeps going with people like Kamala Harris, they're going to lose and lose big, and it'll be a generation before they will change. Um, does the country want Gavin Newsom? I don't think they want anybody from California. Pete Buttigieg, I think, is brilliant, but I don't think our country's ready for a gay president. We need somebody like Wes Moore, who's the governor of Maryland, Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, or Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, or Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan. Wes Moore has said, though, that he does not want to run for president of the United States. Um, Emil Bove, who is another one of Trump's private lawyers. We talked about him. We've talked about Todd Blanche. Um, we've talked about the female district attorney for New Jersey, Habas, last week. Um, he was approved as an appellate court judge. Um, it is a 50-49 vote for a very important circuit, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals on the federal level. There are two whistleblowers that came forward who said that he specifically told the subordinates during the last 6 months to ignore court orders. And also, he is alleged to have lied about the interference in the Mayor Adams case, where Mayor Adams, who was being prosecuted for bribes from the Turkey government, um, in return for those charges being dismissed without prejudice, which means that they can be brought again, um, will be, and in return, he will not enforce the sanctuary cities and cooperate with INS. Um, he lied about that to the Senate, according to the whistleblowers. Um, the Trump administration is currently cutting really good deals with a lot of the Ivy League universities for their discrimination, their hiring practices, their treatment of Jewish students. I support it 100%. They're currently negotiating with Harvard, and the hammer that they have is that they're not going to give federal funding to these private universities. Harvard is now releasing all of their I-9 information on teachers and employees to the federal government, and other schools are agreeing to no transgender in sports, in female sports, and to change certain admission policies so that there's not as many foreigners on their admission. He cut a deal with Brown University, and they will get their funding. They're going to pay $50 million, some which will go to the students. It comes after two other Ivy League schools have negotiated with Trump, which are NYU and Columbia, to restore millions of dollars in research. Um, Trump accounts are the new thing where every young child born will get $1,000. And Scott Bessent talked about that these Trump accounts over the years will grow. Um, and that he stepped on the third rail when he said that these accounts will replace Social Security, which is the contract that we've made since the 1930s, that if you pay into the system when you retire, you will get money out. Trump is in Scotland earlier this week, visiting his golf courses, opening a new course, in addition to the famed Turnberry course, um, named after his mother in Aberdeen. The Scottish do not like Trump. They don't like how he built his golf courses. They don't like what he says about their windmills and them. There was a lot of protests, and the PGA and the Royal and Ancient, who run the Open Championship, have not permitted any championships to be on Trump golf courses, simply because of some his political beliefs, but also because he supports the Live Tour, the competing tour to the PGA. There's a ton of crypto kidnapping going on around the world, and house robberies of people that are known to have a lot of cryptocurrency. They're threatening to cut off their body parts if they don't give them access to their accounts. It's untraceable when this money is stolen. So a lot of these wealthy crypto people are starting to get bodyguards and security. We had a Pacific uh, the largest earthquake off the coast of Russia. It was the largest, strongest earthquake since 2011, which caused tsunami in Japan, Alaska, and Hawaii. Not to the point that it was like a couple years ago, but it was very risky. Yeah. Turning to sports, Cal Raleigh, who they call the Big Dumper, he's the catcher for the Seattle Mariners, has hit over 40 home runs. It's extraordinary. No catcher has hit that many home runs at this point in the season. Nick Kurtz, who is, I think, an Amish background for the Athletics, earlier this week he hit 4 home runs, was 6 for 6, and batted in 18 runs. Venus Williams um, came back and played in a professional event at 45 years old. She won. She's going to play in the United States Open next month, the U.S. Open tennis in New York in the mixed doubles. But the big news for her at 45 years old, she got engaged. She's done extremely well for herself, obviously on court, but off court. She has a women's clothing line, and she's involved in a lot of different things. Very bright woman. Happy to hear from it. Interesting, yesterday I was listening to some of the NFL owners talk about, um, fall ball and getting ready for training camp and the upcoming season. And Jimmy Haslam, who is the owner of the Cleveland Browns, made a statement yesterday that was very curious. He distanced himself from the Shador Sanders pick. Now, did he do that because Shador is not doing well in camp? What he said was, I paid attention to the first and second day of the draft, obviously, with number one picks. But when it got down to the fifth and sixth rounds on the third day, that he said that was the GM's call. That's his call. I don't interfere with it, and he owns it. So if Shador Sanders craps out, obviously he's going to blame the GM on that. Deion Sanders, his father, um, had a particular cancer of the bladder. My father had bladder cancer. It's very serious. My father got a bag where he had to go to the bathroom in a bag. I'm not sure what it's going to be for Deion. Supposedly he lost 40 pounds. Deion's had major problems with diabetes. I think he lost a couple toes. It's very, very sad. Um, this week, one of my favorite players, Ryan Sandberg, who was a second baseman for the Cubs. He played for the Phillies and also managed the Phillies after his career was over with. He died at 65 years old from prostate cancer. Very sad. He had some epic seasons. He made the All Star team, I think, 11 or 12 years in a row. I think at worst, he's one of the top four best second baseman of all time. Obviously, Jackie Robinson's first, probably then Joe Morgan. In Chicago at that time during the 80s, there were three major players for the three major sports. Obviously, you had Brent Hull, also, who was a hockey player, but for the three major sports, football, baseball, and basketball, football, obviously, it was Sweetness, Walter Payton. Um, Basketball was MJ, Michael Jordan, and for the Cubs, it was Ryan Sandberg. So, Ryan, rest in peace, my friend. Going to the questions from the listeners this week. Um, there is this newly discovered evidence that we talked about where Trump's name is on a lot of the different documents. Steve Bannon also has 15 hours of conversations that he had with Epstein because he went in to talk to him about trying to reshape his image. Um, they're trying to get the grand jury records, and I was asked what legal rules keep grand jury records sealed. Um, the reason is because by statute they are not allowed to be revealed to the public. So it's a statutory requirement. Um, does the public pressure ever influence judges when transparency clashes with legal secrecy? All the time. In fact, in South Carolina, we enacted a new rule under 41. Justice told that of matters of public importance, you can't keep them confidential. Or if there's like a products liability case and the company pays uh, to keep the products case quiet that the plaintiff who was injured with the product brings, the court will not let that be sealed because it's a matter of public safety. Second is several prosecutors have resigned over orders to drop charges against, obviously, Mayor Adams in New York City. Um, how do resignations challenge the integrity at the DOJ? It's definitely a statement. Do I think that it changes the policy of Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche? No, they simply don't care. They think that if you resign under protest, that you are not a loyal Trumpster, and good riddance to you. Are there legal safeguards preventing dismissal of corruption cases due to political motives? Yes. A judge has to approve any dismissal request, either by the prosecution in conjunction with the defense or by the prosecution. And many times the judge will not dismiss it. Um, Sanctuary City, New York City versus DOJ. Obviously, the Department of Justice filed suit against New York City, claiming that its sanctuary city policies obstruct federal immigration enforcement. I think they do. And I think that ultimately the INS will win. Um, the federal government does have the right to override city sanctuary laws because federal law uh, preempts state law on these issues. But there are constitutional issues regarding birthright citizenship and other issues that I think the courts are going to have to resolve. Um, we talked about in previous episodes the Trump administration um, doing executive orders where they target law firms and say that because of your positions, either in the impeachment proceedings in the first term or civil lawsuits that have been brought against Trump, you can't practice law in federal courts and enter federal buildings. Um, these have been overturned in court with Wilmer Hale and Perkins Cole. Um, can the president legally penalize or exclude law firms? The answer is maybe, although some courts have already said they can't do it. It's definitely chilling who you're going to be able to hire as your lawyer. I think it's a disgrace. Um, the tsunami we talked about, private property owners aren't going to have a lot of claims to be able to make, obviously, against their insurance companies, but it's not against that they can make against the government unless that they've cut funding to the weather officers or employees who track weather and monitor tsunamis. I talked to you about a book I read about the Galveston, Texas hurricane that came in the early 1900s, which leveled Galveston, Texas, and the federal government had cut the staff of the weather department employees who monitor hurricanes. So possibly there still could be that. The final question is, are cruise lines exposed to liability when the ships must evacuate ports unexpectedly due to natural disasters? No, they're not going to have that. They have a duty to keep their patients safe, their customers safe. Um, there's laws of maritime that apply. Plus, they have a lot of disclaimers and release liability on the documents that you sign. That's it for the audience questions. Dominic Cianchetti, what a great name, said, "Good morning, Eric. I think what is sad is the amount of politicians on that list that basically look the other way um, for, the low life that Jeffrey Epstein is. Yes, the politicians are definitely contorting themselves who claim that they're moral to want to let the Epstein matter go, just like a lot of people in our state turn their blind eye towards what Alex Murdaugh was doing over all those years. So, with that said, that's it for anything but bland. Thank you very much for listening. Talk to you next week.